we have seen the industry ministers met, the commerce ministers met, and they all come up with different kinds of initiatives for the countries to work together. To you, Mr. Zhang from China, what is the most important thing for the summit to be resolved, of course?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think that this summit will aiming for, that is in order to explore, to promote the bright future for those BRIC countries. We need to create our, better partnership. In order to achieve this type of targets, so better global governance issues, including peaceful road, as well as promote development in order to find possible solutions. Of course, industrial development, infrastructure improvement, better trade and investment relationship also need to be, to
infrastructure, better trade. Yeah. Okay, what about you, Mr. Guruswamy?
I think everybody's agreed that BRICS is a good idea, but for some reason it has not been able to work as well as we thought it would because of lack of internal cohesion and also lack of clarity on what kind of role they can play in the changing world. After all, in another 10 years, BRICS countries' GDPs will be bigger than the G7. And we don't have places in the international financial system, we don't have a place in the international security system, and so the West is operating on its own, is running the finances, running the global political architecture. So the other countries are really out of this, and so BRICS has to find space for itself to bring that opinion, its opinion and consensus into the international system. That we have not even work out.
All right, international system, that's what you want to focus on. And what about you, Mr. Barbich, coming from Russia? You're on the phone with us.
Well, I think that the most important thing about BRICS is economic cooperation, mutual investment. Actually, in Russia, the experts are very enthusiastic about the BRICS Plus idea, when you can have free trade zones, not necessarily just between BRICS members, but kind of extending the free trade zones that BRICS members have with other countries. For example, in Russia, we have a free trade zone with Vietnam via the so-called Eurasian Economic Union, a union of former Soviet republics which are interested in having a common customs zone with Russia. Unfortunately, the West, by the West I mean the United States and the European Union, they don't recognize the Eurasian Economic Union. They pretend it doesn't exist. But China recognizes it because for China it's an opportunity. Via the Eurasian Economic Union, you can have trade routes going all the way to Western Europe. And you can have a free trade zone with Vietnam via the Eurasian Economic Union. So it's a good example how BRICS Plus can in fact enrich not just BRICS members but also other countries.
All right, BRICS Plus. It seems that all the points, gentlemen, the three of you have mentioned, can be some of the discussion points for the summit to handle. But when it comes to Plus, this has also been an idea raised recently. What about that Plus? We see, Mr. Zhang, even now with 5 members of the BRICS, they're still having issues bilaterally and also multilaterally. There's border issue, there's also internal political issue, there's economic cooperation issue, competition issue. So with more members joining in, can the 5 countries really handle it?
Yeah. Just before you and the reporters already introduced those difficulties. So, but I think that no matter how difficult, no matter how many barriers before us, the thing is that we have to promote development in different economies. If you look at the trade data within those BRICS countries, 10 years ago, its trade volume in global trade volume about 11%. But today only 16%. But our GDP proportion already climbing up from past 12% to 23%. So that means our trade volume behind our economic development.
Right.
So that means trade investment within us, there are so big space we need to explore. Meanwhile, you can find that today we are facing with globalization. Even if there is an anti-globalization, meanwhile, there is a bad signal from Trump administration, trade protectionism. But it's very critical for BRICS countries today working together to promote, regional cooperation and globalization.
You say a must, but will they? That's two different issues, right?
I'd like to add one sentence that is, except those 5 BRICS countries, actually other big, developing economies in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, also need to join this cooperation. And maybe they can, work with BRICS platform in order to explore possible solution.
Right, Mr. Guruswamy, do you believe that despite all of the challenges that I have mentioned earlier, that the countries can really work together? It seems that there have been too many issues to handle.
There have been issues. Issues primarily are between China and India. And we are seeing right now a military standoff in a remote corner of India. I think we've got to resolve these issues.
But China is believing that is the part of China. So, but we are not here to debate about that. I'll let you to continue.
Well, we believe, we're not about that. Okay, yeah. So we have to sort this out. There is the issue of nuclear proliferation in the region. China is seen by India as a proliferator, exporting nuclear technology. These are issues which we have to sit down and sort out. And China and India both have got able, tested, and strong leaderships. We can sit and work this out. But the geopolitics of the world right now makes a conflict between India or a divergence between India a requirement for their politics. So this is a game we've got to be careful about and and tread carefully. I think China, Russia, and India particularly, we have a smaller grouping called BRICS within the BRICS, which needs to coordinate its activities even more closely in terms of of trade, expanding our markets. For instance, there is no transport link between India and China. We are 2 neighboring markets, the second and third biggest markets in the world, but we don't have a link. So we need to work these things out.
Let's talk about these links.
And think.
Let's talk about these links. Let's talk about these links, gentlemen. Rather than talk so abstract, let's talk about some specifics. There are some agreements reached by the commerce ministers, for example, about the digitalization at the ports. For example, about different kinds of complementarities when it comes to trade. Exactly, Mr. Zhang, which area do you think? And give us some examples of how of these abstract policy lines likely to help trade among the BRICS countries. Mr. Zhang.
Yeah, if you look at trade facilitation index in different BRICS countries, actually compared with those developed countries and newly industrialized country, actually we are quite behind.
So tell me about how these policies are likely to help. Give me some examples, not just abstract policy lines. Go ahead, Mr. Zhang.
For example, e-commerce and digital ports. In China has a very rapid development. Even if for Russian friends, 2 years ago, they had bought a lot of products on platform of platform, and then their e-platform system collapsed for a short term. So that shows actually those residents in different BRICS countries, they have demand for Chinese, so for those products made in China. Meanwhile, in China now, we also have very huge market demand for those products made in BRICS countries. So that's a potential. So this time, BRICS summit actually provided, suggestions. That is, we have to promote our, digital ports and e-commerce development, and then that will benefit for those BRICS countries.
Talking about the e-commerce, Mr. Guruswamy from India, we see that Chinese entrepreneurs, for example, and now so well known Jack Ma from Alibaba earlier already promoted to try to establish a platform for small and medium-sized enterprises from all over the world, particularly in Asia Pacific region, to trade. And yet it's so hard because of national borders, because of political situations, because of geopolitics, because of political agenda, it's driving it away from the real trade and economic ties. How do you think this BRICS summit is likely to help in the overall bigger picture? Can it really help, given, once again, all of these challenges we talk about?
Well, there are challenges. If there are no challenges, there's no need to meet. Because there are challenges, we need to meet and sort them out. We've got to talk about these things with clarity of mind, with good briefing papers, between consensus emerging between our intelligenceas in all the countries, particularly China and India, where there are two big divergent nations out here. And we have large outstanding problems. But China can't see other countries only as the market. It has to also invest and also be a market for other countries.
But talking about e-commerce specifically, talking about e-commerce specifically, because that is exactly what the
e-commerce is fine. Jack Ma's site Alibaba advertises in India, but it has only Chinese products on it. There's no Indian products on it. And we have Indian e-commerce sites, and Indian IT sector companies find it difficult to penetrate China. So we've got to work these things out. There's too much of mutual suspicion right now, and and intense competitiveness. We've got to sort these things out and allow each other easy access here.
All right, and let's go to Mr. Barbish on the phone. It's hard to hear your voice. I hope this is better now. That is, we see trade and economic ties is really the main mission of the BRICS countries. But, Mr. Barbish, we also heard recently the WTO representative talking about there's likely to be some real tough time ahead, possibly even a global trade war if some countries taking certain actions. So, at this point, how important is this BRICS summit? And how important is this BRICS summit really work something out and work things out, bring them to the international system?
Well, you are quite right when you talk about a global trade war, because we have just seen the United States imposing sanctions not just on Russia, but even threatening sanctions against European companies from the EU that do business with Russia. So I think what we see now is a competition between various methods, various models of globalization. There is no longer one globalization, as it was the case, I think, in the early 90s. I think it is very interesting. Right before the summit, Gallup International came up with a very interesting poll in 40 countries, with which countries do people in, say, Afghanistan or Italy or Russia, with which other countries do they want to trade? And the results were very interesting. About 40% of the people in various countries, of course, want to trade primarily with the United States and with the European Union. There is nothing new about it.
Okay.
But 35% wanted to trade with China, Russia, and India. About 10% with Russia, about 15% with China. In Afghanistan, the biggest portion of the people, when asked with which other foreign country do they want to trade, they mentioned India.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that India itself wants to trade with the United States.
Well, motivation is one
Britain.
thing. Motivation is one thing, Mr. Barbish. You know what I'm talking about. But to do it and how to do it is the most important thing. That is exactly my question, which is when you have the WTO head in the world talking about there's likely to be global trade wars if things are really getting worse and out of control. Can BRICS countries bound themselves together to get something into the international system? For example, out of this summit, what can we specifically expect?
Well, I think that we can expect more deals on the new development bank, which was founded by BRICS, on the AIIB, which is very important. And in general, I expect more people getting interested and more countries getting interested in BRICS as an alternative globalization model for the world.
All right.
In the current situation, when the United States and the European Union apply sanctions to various countries, sometimes without any urgent reason, like the EU is going to impose sanctions on Poland, for example, its own member. In this situation, of course, people are looking to China, people are looking to Russia, people are looking to BRICS.
Thank you.
And in this situation, the fact that our member countries are actually scattered around the globe, like Brazil is in the midst of Latin America, South Africa is on the other tip of the African continent, Russia, China, and India are in Eurasia.
That's right.
Instead of being a weakness, it becomes our strength. You know, together
we hope it is. We hope it is
we can tie the world together.
We hope it is the strength. Of course, the confidence needs to be backed by real actions and policy coordinations. Mr. Zhang, let me ask you about this. What about that? I mean, when there is a possible of trade war, can that really bring these countries together and better even?
Yeah. Firstly, I think that BRICS countries, all of those BRICS countries are important members of WTO. We will call for, all of countries has to, respect those rules and regulations made by WTO. If the U.S. or other countries, violated those rules, we will fight with them. The second one is BRICS countries need to work together in order to implement WTO, new agreement that is a trade facilitation agreement. We should be a good example.
Right.
And the third one is all of those BRICS countries need to promote domestic reform in order to improve trade facilitation level.
Okay, Mr. Goswami, even though there are bilateral issues, BRICS countries, if they come into the summit, they have to have a bigger vision. They have to think about themselves as a group, and they have to think about themselves as the forerunner of the emerging and developing countries, work something for them as well. So, Mr. Goswami, in that spirit, what do you think needs to be achieved?
I think the first thing which the BRICS countries need to do is to become a formal organization with a formal secretariat, a formal institution from which they can work. Right now, it's a floating association which goes from country to country, but you need a formal secretariat to work things out, to work on specific policies, to work on larger issues. For instance, between the 4 countries or 5 countries of BRICS, we will be buying almost 65% of the world's civilian aircraft in the next 50 years or 40 years. I think China, India, Russia, and Brazil have the technology to build our own aircraft. Why don't we have a big technology project? We can have many projects like this. China has got a lot of expertise in high-speed railways. Russia has plenty of expertise in aviation. We can dovetail, join together, create large markets, create large technology pockets for ourselves. Otherwise, all this becomes restricted technologies from the West.